final session that we have together here on day one. And you guys are in for a treat. We're all in for a treat. So excited to have every year we do a all-star Fuse panel. And excited to have these folks here with us today. I think you're going to learn a ton from them. We got a QR code on the screen. If you do have any questions at all, you can post those. But I'm going to turn it now over back to Dr. Yeager, and he's going to facilitate our panel and introduce our guests. So Dr. Yeager, take it.
All right. Thanks for the warm applause. Who is this guy? Could he be more disappointing? I'm so thrilled to have this wonderful panel. Let me just briefly introduce folks. First, we have Dr. Katey Arrington, who's the Director of Systemic Transformation at the Charles A. Dana Center. And she's been a leader in math and STEM education reform in Texas for at least 15 years, maybe longer. She'll say a little bit more. Been a part of the U-Teach program here, and we're absolutely thrilled to have her. And we'll give her the Fuse single clap after me. 1, 2, 3. Well done. I could see some room for improvement, but it's okay. Next, we have Dr. Art Markman, my dear friend and colleague. His office is next door to mine in the psychology building. He's a professor of psychology, a well-known cognitive scientist. He's the vice provost for academic affairs, so he is in charge of a lot of or all of UT's extended campus ventures and new educational innovations. He's the author of a book called Smart Thinking, which I recommend. You should go check it out. And he's the host of an awesome show on NPR that many people listen to in the mornings here in Austin called Two Guys in Your Head. Let's give a Fuse welcome to Dr. Art Markman. Well done, slight improvement. Next, Dr. Carol Dweck, a professor of psychology at Stanford University, one of the leading scientists in developmental, social, personality psychology. Some of her work has been some of the most cited work in the entire field, and she's a dear friend and mentor for us here in Fuse. Please give a Fuse welcome to Dr. Carol Dweck. Carol, I'm sorry, your welcome was the worst. It's not a reflection of our gratitude. 1, 2, 3. All right. So what we're going to do is I have some questions prepared. We're going to let each panelist answer, and then also you guys will add questions. I have Slido pulled up right here, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions from the group. So let's just start with our shared purpose here in Fuse. We are focused on 6th to 9th grade math in Texas, in public schools, 2024, 2025. Within that kind of narrow but highly important goal, why math now? And I'd just love to hear from everyone, starting with Dr. Arrington. So, take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, first of all. So excited to be here to talk to you guys. So math now, because math is more important than it ever has been before. If you think about the way our society works, the way our economy works, there's way more data than there has ever been before to consider. There's more information. There's more inputs that are available to us. And the more we can do with that input, right, the more we can think of rationally and look at the way patterns are telling us we should be moving, the better. Our economy, the job market, is going to get more and more math dependent. It's not going to get less and less math dependent. So we've got to figure out math education and make it so that every student benefits and every student walks away from our K-12 experience ready for whatever post-secondary experience they're interested in. Every post-secondary experience is going to require some sort of mathematics, right? Whether it's statistics, calculus, data science, but there's going to be math, and we need to make sure they're prepared for that.
And Dr. Arrington, if you don't mind, you have had such an important role in Texas, working at the Dana Center, one of the leading institutions for math reform. I'm just curious, just to follow up on this, what kind of brings you personally to this field of math education? Why? It's clearly your passion. I'm just curious if you could share a little bit your story with folks.
Absolutely. So growing up, I was a military brat, and I moved back and forth and here and there, and I missed a lot of things in my education, but the one thing that I felt like was a string that I could depend on was mathematics. And it actually, strangely enough, I don't think a lot of people think of it this way, but it was a social tool for me. Every time I moved to a new place, I was good at math, and I could show that, and it gave me confidence, right? So I see students in schools, and they're afraid of math, and they don't want to talk about it. And I just think it could be a tool for so many amazing things for our students. I mean, yes, of course, job markets and careers, but also really connecting with other people. People talk about the joy of mathematics, and I think sometimes that's a little nebulous and hard to think about, but I have had some of the best conversations. I'm outing myself as a huge nerd right now, but my colleagues and I at the Dana Center, we will sit down and we will have 2 hours of conversation about why ratios and fractions are different and why they're the same, and we play off of each other's ideas, and it just brings such joy to me that I want other people to know about that too.
Awesome. Art, you're in charge of making lots of decisions about how UT spends its scarce resources in education. From your perspective, why do you feel like math, sixth to ninth grade, why is it so important right now?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, this is my I was thinking about this as we were talking. This is my 40th consecutive year in college, right? and one of the things that does is that you spend enough time hanging out with college students, you start thinking about, well, what do our college students care about? And they don't necessarily say, gosh, I care about math, but what they say is, I care about climate change, I care about the world situation, I care about politics, I care about my future, and almost all of the things that our students care about now, and in one way or another, are going to require them to synthesize some amount of data in order to reach conclusions. And in order to argue with people successfully who may disagree with them about the way that the world works. And a prerequisite to being able to engage with any data is to speak math like a native, right? Because if you're stumbling over numbers, then you can't get beyond the numbers to think beyond them and think, what does this mean? And how can I use this as part of an argument? And so in order to speak math like a native, by the time you're in college, you have to really get it early. And sixth to ninth grade, that sort of middle school period, and that area is the point at which math goes from being really a lot of arithmetic to the kind of mature math that's going to underlie that ability to think about data. That's where you get introduced to the concept of a variable. It's where you get introduced to the concept of data and lines and graphs and all sorts of more sophisticated concepts. That's where that leap needs to be taken. And the sooner that students can engage with that, believe that it's going to be important in their future, the more likely they're going to be by the time they get to college to then have enough of a background in that to be able to really focus on the meaning behind the numbers rather than the numbers themselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Carol.
Katey, I love your story. And as you acknowledged, most kids, I don't know, 80, 90%, aren't like that. Maybe I'm overestimating, but they're afraid of math. They don't think they're good at math. They think only brilliant people are good at math. They think you have it or you don't. And what I love about this program here is it's meant to undo those negative preconceptions that kids come with. So it's really exciting. The other point I want to make is 6th to 9th grade is so important.
Yes.
Because it's right there. What are they going to take in 10th grade? That's going to determine if they take math in 10th grade, it leaves that gateway open to all these other professions. If they don't, the door is pretty much closed. So this is a crucial time, and a crucial time for their decisions, a crucial time for educators to make math more engaging and successful experience.
So that kind of urgency, I think, drives a lot of us. It's why you guys were so generous to volunteer your time on this panel. A reason why we created Fuse is to help do something about that urgent and pressing issue of improving math education. I start with Katey again. I'm just, Fuse is a fellowship. It's not just a training program. It's not just a list of things you're supposed to do. How do you see Fuse positioned to help Texas do something about the urgent and pressing needs in math education?
So I think there is a time and a space for lots of different kinds of professional learning, right? In addition to my role at the Dana Center, I'm also the president of NCSM, which is a leadership organization for math educators. If you don't know about it, you should check it out. We have a conference every year. It's amazing. People come and they connect with new people and they get new ideas. And those things are amazing, right? Like, that's great. We want people to do that. You need opportunities to do that. But to think that you're going to come and get a new idea and go back and on your own implement in a world that's already crazy, let's just admit, right? Every teacher's world is a little bit crazy, very complex. You're making tons of decisions. It's very hard to create change that way, right? So I think the fellowship gives an opportunity for you to connect with others who are also going to be trying to do these things, but in an ongoing way, right? You have support. You get to try things and come back and talk about them. There's lots of research that shows ongoing, job-embedded professional development is going to have way more impact in the long run, right? So I think conferences and single workshops and things like that have a place, but this is a unique opportunity to really build some skills and some knowledge and a community around these ideas that can really get them implemented in a scalable way. This is one of the things we talk about at the Dana Center a lot, is of course, pockets of excellence are good, but we really want to change the system so that we're impacting lots of students in a sustainable way. And I feel like this gives you the opportunity to really have that kind of impact.
Yeah. And Art, you think a ton about different education models. You're constantly innovating. I'm just curious, what stands out to you about Fuse and what you see?
Yeah. To me, it's the ability to translate something you've learned about education into action is a crucial step. And if you think about the science of motivation and the cognitive science of motivation, I usually try to characterize the ability to be motivated to perform an action, which is what you need to do, right? You need to be motivated not just to have learned some stuff, but to be able to turn this into practice in classrooms. And the science suggests you need what I call a bridgeable gap, right? So the idea behind the gap is, and this is Gabrielle Ettingen's work at NYU, she shows, look, the more that there's a gap psychologically between where I am right now and where I'd like to be, the more energy I have to do something about it. And that's great, and all of us, we see the gap between where we are with the education of our students and where we'd like to be, and that's energizing. The problem is, physics teaches, this is my physics analogy, physics teaches us that energy without direction is heat, right? Which psychologically manifests itself as frustration and anger. And
look at me.
But energy with direction, this is physics, right? Energy with direction is work. And so where does the direction come from? Well, that's the bridge. You need a set of concrete steps that you can carry out in order to take that energy and use it to transform a classroom into the kind of learning space you want it to be. Making that gap that you are all experiencing, making that bridgeable, requires both coming to events like this, but then having a community that can help you to put that into practice. And to me, I think what I love about the difference between just a professional development and a real fellowship is that opportunity to then be able to reach out to colleagues and say, you know what, I'm experiencing heat today. I'm frustrated by this. How do I actually channel that into some work? Here's what's going on in my classroom. What is it that we've learned that'll help me to move my classroom forward and take that next step to bridge the gap? And that's where I think this whole group has a real impact.
That's all. I'm going to steal that 110%.
me too.
Thank you. Heat versus work. Carol.
Well, what I love about this program is, yes, it's more than PD. It's not a wonderful day or two and we send you home, but Fuse honors you with a fellowship. Fuse has a continued commitment to you. As was said, you form a bond and community. But even more exciting, you leave a legacy for future teachers. You pay this forward. All of you imagine in the future, after the program, for future Fuse Fellows are going to learn everything that you learned as you add to the library of practices. So it's super exciting. I also love that David and his group went and found teachers who, as they were planning this program, teachers who were bright spots, teachers whose students performed at a high level, and they had much smaller discrepancies among students from underrepresented groups and let's say overrepresented groups. And not only found out what individual practices the teachers used, didn't just make a list of practices, but understood that those teachers were creating a culture in which students learned, enjoyed learning, felt that the teachers were committed to them and their futures. And this is something really radically new.
Yeah. I mean, I think we learned from them and then we hired them. So thankfully, we've got these great facilitators.
Okay.
Art, I want to talk about engagement. So, you know, as a cognitive scientist, you know, you do experiments and you don't always care necessarily what people are being asked to remember and learn. You're thinking a lot about the process of presenting information, processing it, et cetera. And you, in my opinion, perhaps more than anyone, have translated a lot of those awesome experiments into practical things that businesses around the world use, people in their cars are hearing. You know, just from your perspective, what's exciting about the kind of cognitive science of engagement that makes us, you know, optimistic about bringing it to classrooms to improve the lives of students and teachers?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, a lot of the work that you're presenting is creating a real opportunity to bring good practice into the classroom experience and to help students to really understand not just here's a thing you got to do, but why you have to do this, how this fits together for you as a student, how this is going to be you know, a part of an overall learning experience for you. And I think that's, you know, if I look back at just, you know, the way that we've transformed education, you know, over the last several decades, I mean, I think one of the most important things we do now, and we're trying to do this much more at the college level as well, is to go beyond the completion of an individual assignment, an individual class, and to actually think about those connections across a curriculum. You know, fundamentally, memory is not about being able to hold on to a particular fact. It's about being able to connect the web of knowledge that you have together. You know, in the book Smart Thinking, one of the things I talk about is if you sort of average across a lot of memory studies, what you find is that basically people can remember 3 things about any experience that they've had. And the weasel word in there is thing, right? Because what's a thing? And the answer, as you all know, the answer to every hard question in psychology is it depends. and what a thing is depends on how much you already know. So the more that your knowledge is already interconnected, the more that when you enter a new situation, you're going to remember larger chunks about it because you're going to be able to structure that experience better. The less you know, the less you're able to remember ultimately. And I think that we're, bringing that into the classroom and helping students to really understand that by becoming more expert, they're actually making it easier to learn new stuff.
Yeah.
Is such a critical piece of this, and I think it's very empowering for students because it puts them much more in control of their own ability to continue learning.
Yeah, that reminds me of a quotation I heard recently, which is, if you ever reread an old favorite book, you do that not to see how the book has changed, but how have you changed since the last time you read it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Carol.
I want to add to that because as students learn more and integrate more and see patterns, the interest becomes intrinsic. It's not about just the grade or will their parents yell at them or withhold goodies. How will they look to their... No, it becomes a puzzle. It becomes something you kind of immerse yourself in, solve, experience of flow state. I think that's really critical in students, not just going on in math in school, but being attracted to professions where the job is figuring out. I went into academic research because I love figuring things out. I love thinking about them and turning them around in my head and seeing the answer.
Yeah.
And that could happen for students in math.
Yeah. So, Katey, you are working at so many different levels. So same question to you, but just want to tailor it that a lot of people think about math reform and they say just the curriculum, or we need to have different tests, or it's all about the materials. Why do you feel like engagement is something important to be focusing on, where it's not just a side dish, it's a key part of the recipe?
Yeah. So I think connecting to several things that have been set up here today, one of my favorite authors is John Allen Paulos. He's a mathematician. He writes about getting more people engaged with math. And he has this quote, I'm going to get it at least close to right, I think, that mathematics is no more arithmetic than literature is typing, right? And we often approach mathematics and have traditionally approached mathematics as the series of steps and things that you have to do that feels more like the logistics or the mechanics of mathematics. And what I think is terribly important is that we engage students in mathematics like it is literature, right? Like there's a story to be told, like there is something there to be discovered and discussed and engaged with, right? But if we don't give them the math that is worth that, they're never going to do that, right? We have to give them questions and problems and real-world situations, right? Climate change, but also, elections and all kinds of things that we're discussing. If they see that they can really dig in and engage with that using mathematics, I feel like they're going to be so much better off in life. At a conference that I went to not long ago about that was put on by STEM industry folks, right, not education folks. They said we can teach them the steps. What we need them to do is engage in the thinking about what needs to happen and figuring out problems. And that's where I think we need to shift in our mathematics education, is treating it like the tool that it is, right? The way that we process information and engage with each other.
Great. And last prepared question, then we have lots of great questions in the Slido. So one of the things we'll ask Fuse Fellows to do is to administer student modules where they're going to get feedback from their students on how the class is going and how things are coming across to students. And then ask fellows to engage with that information in conferences and so on. So there's a kind of scientific process of continuous improvement that is implied in a fellowship that's different, again, from the passive recipient of professional development. I just would love to hear everyone kind of, why is that kind of valuable? Why is that important and something that you think, needs to be a part of a program like this? So maybe Art.
Okay.
Start with you.
So no, it's a great question, and I would say, one of the real failings we have, I think, in general, it's true in schools, it's true in lots of other places, is that we assume that the goal in life is mistake minimization rather than continuous improvement. And I had the experience of being one of the heads for COVID planning for UT, and you would think that our goal was to have the perfect plan in August of 2020 when we were reopening the university. And in fact, that was not really our goal. Our goal was to get a B-. Our goal was to get a good plan together by August, and then have a process for taking all of the data that we had available and using it to, week by week, improve what we were doing based on the experiences of students, faculty, and staff to get better at keeping the community safe and understanding behavior. And everything in life is like that. Everything is like software. You roll out a product that's a B- and then you improve it until you get an A, and teaching is like that too. And I think that what you're doing is creating the environment in which you're getting the right kind of feedback so that you roll out the best possible version of yourself and then get feedback to help make it better. And that's the only way we can do anything. And to the extent that you can do that and then also let the students know you're doing it, that's the real critical part. Because I think part of what creates so much anxiety for students is that belief that I got to get an A, as opposed to I got to get out there and continue getting better.
Yeah, Carol.
The first course I taught as a professor had 365 students in a lecture hall. And I worked my heart out and gave all. And for the most part, they appreciated it. When I read the course evaluations, they were largely very positive. But there were a number of them that were very critical. And I felt hurt. And I felt angry. Wait a minute. I poured my heart out. I put so much time in. And they didn't like it, and they don't like me, and so on and so forth. And that's the worst approach one can take to that. So I urge you, if you come to the Fuse sessions and meet with your cohort and implement lots of great stuff, and the students don't feel more engaged when you poll them again, et cetera, keep on learning. Don't take it as a condemnation of who you are or the ungrateful students. Use that information, because the things that you're learning in Fuse work, but they work over time.
Yeah, just to double click on that, that's what we've learned every single year, that it's very hard to change something about our implied and implicit practice and think we're going to get it right with 100% of kids right away. So we've built in that process of learning, but the first step is to believe it's going to take a little bit of iteration. Yeah, Katey.
Just to be additive, I'll shift gears just a little bit in that. Just touch on the fact, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but there's a little bit of a STEM teacher shortage out there. And there has been more and more researches through sociology, through psychology, that people aren't choosing teaching because they see it as stagnant. especially in STEM, really smart folks could go out and do anything they want, where they get to be creative and inventive and innovative and collaborative, and they don't see teaching that way. They see it as it's the same as it's been for a very long time. So by engaging in this, you're not only benefiting your students, you're also benefiting the profession, right? If we look at teaching for what it is and should be, which is this moment where you get to really impact students' lives, and you have to work really hard to make that happen, right? You have to be creative and innovative to get to that. We're not only benefiting the students, but we're also benefiting the profession. There's a great school up in the Northeast who has created the school where they daily, the teachers talk to their students about what they're trying to achieve with the lesson today. I'm trying this new thing with you, and I'm hoping that these are the results, but you guys tell me. And not only are they seeing student improvement in the classes, a very high number of them are going on to become teachers, which is a very interesting pattern, right? So I just think it's important that we're here. I'm glad that we're here together and doing this, and really excited for you guys to be working together in this way.
All right, great. So we have some questions now from the audience, and again, feel free to add some more. Here's a question. Maybe Art, you know some interesting cognitive science on this. What's a good strategy to help kids turn off the outside noise? Personal, social issues, probably devices, and instead show up kind of ready to learn in the classroom. So I guess the question is, what works to not be as distracted by the world around you?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two answers to that question. There's, I think, persistent noise and then specific noise, right? So specific noise is, I got up today and my mom was angry at me, and so I'm coming in today, you know, feeling in a particular way. And then persistent noise is just the kind of background hum of what's going on in the world right now. And I think that those things are a little different. I mean, I think as teachers, one of the things we have to do is to be sensitive to some of our students and recognize that they're going to have good days and bad days, and we're not always going to catch them in ways that they're going to be able to really focus on a particular day. The persistent noise, though, I think we can do something about, and that's, I think, a lot of where habit comes in. So, you know, again, in smart thinking, actually, I talk about one of the most crucial aspects of effective thinking is to have really good habits around learning and thinking. And in the classroom, that really, you know, having that great classroom routine that reminds students, okay, we're back in the classroom, here's how we start every day, here's how we engage, is the purpose of that, the ritual associated with that, is that it helps to shift the context and shift the mindset from there's a world out there and then there's our world in here. And now we're entering our world in here. And that's part of that purpose of building a set of habits from the beginning of the year that you stay consistent with, so that it creates a sense of consistency across the year. And I think that opens up a feeling in students that they can be open to learning in that environment.
Another question. This is a question I hear a lot, is that students say things like, why do we need to know this? When am I ever going to use the Pythagorean theorem or anything like this, right? So Katey or Carol or Art, anyone want to dive on that? What do you say to a kid about the why should we do this question?
Let's hear from the math educator.
Well, so I said a little bit of this earlier. We have to be giving them math that is worthy of their attention, right? I'm a mathematician. If you give me a sheet of the same problem with 40 problems on it and expect me to pay attention, it's just not going to happen, right? So first, I think we need to be giving students engaging, culturally relevant mathematics that there's a chance they might engage with, right? The routines, I think, are huge. I also think the culture that you build in your classroom around what mathematics is, how it can help us, and what are the big things that I want you to get out of this. I feel like as math teachers, we focus a lot on, like, what are we doing today? What are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing the next day? And that like microscopic view, I think also it hurts the chances of students engaging, right? If we see the little things as building to a bigger picture, they're gonna be way more engaged. They're gonna be thinking about, how does this connect to the things that I've done before and what comes after? I just think there's a lot about our instruction that helps us with that engagement.
And as you said before, today more than ever, math, data science figures into so
Absolutely.
many things that students are vitally interested in.
Yes.
In a study David led, but I participated in, high school freshmen were asked, what are the problems you care about in the world? And it was unbelievable. There were 12,000 students, half of them got that question. I read maybe 1,000 of their responses. You heard very few talking about their own personal success or gain. They really care about what's happening in the world. And if math is a key to understanding and addressing some of those issues, that could be very exciting for students.
Absolutely. So I think I say the words data science at least 10 times every day. We talk a lot about data science and data literacy these days. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is data science is part math, but it's also part social studies and part science, right? The problems that we solve or have the potential to solve in data science is not just math. We're using math to do so many other things. So
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really powerful is you pull up the front page of any section of the newspaper, and there are math issues there, and they're sometimes lurking beneath the surface. So, picked up the paper today, and there was a discussion of supply chain issues that are creeping back in again.
Yeah.
Well, what's a supply? Why are there supply chain issues? Well, part of the problem is that companies have to forecast future demand. That's a math question, right? They're taking the number of things that they sold at one time, and using that information along with other numbers about what's going on in the world to predict how many things they should produce today in order to be ready for tomorrow. And the closer they get to being right, the better everything in the world works, right? So the beauty of this is that's a lot of algebra right there, among other things, right? I think you don't have to dig very far to show that things that show up in the newspaper are rooted deeply in the ability of people to understand or fail to understand math. And you can bring that into the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is this idea that, the old way of making the argument is if you know this, if you get an A on this assignment, then you do well in this class, and then you do the next class, and then eventually you get to go to college, and then you get that degree. And it's like you got to wait 30 years for your second marshmallow, right?
Or it trains your mind.
Or you learn like this, just generally you're learning in mental endurance or something like that, right? But that sounds like eating your vegetables.
yes.
And we don't have to look far to see middle school or high school health class like not, delivering on its promise to do a lot of this stuff well. So I think that finding an argument that's more directly and presently relevant to young people, like, okay, right now, you can be the kind of person who makes a difference for this issue, or who can just understand the complexities of the world. That's like an immediate payoff. So I think that kind of stuff is really interesting and is lurking under the surface and is kind of a low-hanging fruit. Yeah.
And I want to say one thing that's so amazing about Fuse, no one's asking you to throw away your curriculum and start all over. And in fact, when David initially had the idea of this program, we thought, really? Are teachers going to want additional stuff to do at this point in time as the pandemic is unwinding and so forth? But again, the beauty is it's not piling work upon work upon work. It's integrating techniques into what you already do.
Yeah, it's meant to enhance the payoff of what teachers are already doing. A bunch of other great questions. I'll just pick one just so we can end on time. Question about just the decline of attention and kind of executive function in this modern age, which I think a lot of teachers are, feeling like they're contending with. And, John Haidt has a big book, The Anxious Generation, that, real scientists take a lot of issue with. But I'm just kind of curious, Art and anyone else, what are your thoughts on this kind of supposed gap between the older, wiser, more experienced generations and then the younger generations' inability to focus and pay attention?
So as far as I understand it, Adam and Eve got to middle age and then went kids these days, and it's persisted ever since. It's anyone who's ever hung out with kids under the age of 18 knows they can pay attention for hours to all sorts of things. They just don't pay attention to the same stuff that we paid attention to. So I think, I think a lot of what we're trying, what we're recognizing is that we have somewhat more sophisticated consumers right now, in the sense that they want to be completely engaged in the work that they're doing, right? Having information wash over them is not going to lead to laser focus when you live in an environment in which you're able to immerse yourself in all sorts of things. I think their students have recognized that they can get themselves immersed in doing things, and even playing with social media apps requires physical actions that sitting in the classroom doesn't. So I think creating that engagement in classrooms, which we've known is something that we need to do for years anyhow, is just a crucial part of this. So it's less about an inability to pay attention and more a cry for engagement that reflects the rest of the way that our students are living.
Right. I mean, what I think we've tried to argue is that we just have better competition for attention than we had before.
Right.
It's not their inability. It's that we can't get away with presuming 110% attention at all times despite what we do.
Right.
And we're seeing that even with the difficulty getting students back to school. We see chronic absenteeism after the COVID kids staying home. We have more competition. And I think the argument we've tried to make is that take better advantage of the time you have young people and make sure that it's engaging. It doesn't mean your classroom needs to be a slot machine or Fruit Ninja all the time, but it's work that's complex, meaningful, connected to something they care about, builds on, all those things. The adolescent brain hasn't changed. It can still be engaged by those things if we do it right. Yeah, Carol?
Yeah, I agree.
Great, we're done.
When we went to school, well, we just did it. I would sit back in some classes and think, this is unbelievably boring and meaningless. But I would do the work and get an A. But these kids aren't willing to feel that something is boring and meaningless and then do the work.
Yeah.
Nor
As
should
we're
they.
saying, it needs to be engaging, meaningful in some way.
Yeah. I mean, and then I think that the public narrative is, well, they're expecting too much, or they want everything to be a Marvel movie, et cetera. I mean, I think the idea is that, you can look back in the 1920s and 1910s, you could look at Dewey, right? They're complaining about the same issues. And it's kind of like we need to be living up a little bit more to art in the bargain, but we don't have to turn our class into a TV show, right? It can be meaningful work. Like factoring trinomials doesn't have to be like disconnected memorization exercise, right? It can be connected, as Art was saying, to a network of knowledge. It can build on something that relates to something that matters to them. et cetera.
Also, the people who create curricula and teach are the ones who are good at school, right? So part of our problem is, there's a selection bias in who ends up in rooms like this. It's
So
the
people like us.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, you went to college 40 years ago. You never left.
Right, and I never left. Right, so I must think school is really cool.
Yeah, right.
So naturally, it should be like I thought it should be,
Right.
as opposed to recognizing that actually most people didn't have a great experience at school.
Yeah.
Not all of them succeeded. So maybe what we need, it's sort of like that diagram you see of the airplane, where they looked at the survivorship bias thing, where they looked at where all the bullet holes were in the plane and realized they needed to reinforce all the places where there weren't bullet holes when the plane returned, because those were the places where the bullets hit the plane and the plane blew up, right? So I think it's the same thing, right? Part of the problem is we're paying attention to all of us who got through the system really well and then complaining about everybody else. And what we need to be doing is focusing on the ones who didn't do well and asking, what are we doing wrong with them that we can be more engaging and help more of them to be as successful as we were.
So Lee Ross, who was a mentor of mine in graduate school, calls it the golden rule problem. That, golden rule is do unto others as you would have someone do unto you. And that's a great rule for morality, but it's a terrible rule for designing for others, because you end up, if you're someone who did well in school, you end up designing experiences for the kind of person who loves school.
And let's be clear, the people who love school will thrive on it too. More of them will want to go into mathematical fields.
Yeah. So I think you've posed a series of great challenges. We are going to wrap up. But I want to just thank all of you for engaging with us, for your attention, for your great questions. If you weren't able to get them answered, then, find us over tequila shots or whatever else we're going to do at happy hour, and feel free to ask us. But in general, let's give a warm Fuse welcome. 1, 2, 3. Very above average. Very good. All right. Thank you very much. Turn it over to Ryan and take us home.